Earlier, I described the Action on Objects teaching cycle as it relates to the CARE acronym. Let's expand just a little bit what we're talking about here. In particular, the manipulatives have to have vocabulary attached to them. We have to know what a ones unit is, what a tens unit is, what a hundreds flat is, for example. When we do this, we're really functioning at a very basic memory recall level. I recognize that we could develop vocabulary in much more in depth, but at this point, I would be happy if students could recognize what I'm saying enough to pick it up and to act upon it. For example, if the students are able to find the hundreds flat when I'm asking for it, that's going to be sufficient for what I'm looking for. So initially, the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that the manipulatives that we're going to be using can be selected and identified by the students. And that's really what we're referring to when we're talking about the building of vocabulary. Now, this can be done in passing. It can be done very quickly. For example, when I was at the Reading Center at Illinois, there was a really lovely study ran by Dr. Taffy Raphael, who had a bunch of pre-kinder students. And at the very first day of a summer session, she had some trays selected in the back of the classroom. And she said, I'd like you to, and she told one child, I'd like you to go get the fuchsia tray for me. And the little guy hops up and trots to the back and grabs one at random. Turns out there was only one that was fuchsia. Fuchsia is a purplish color. I didn't know that either. Amazing the things you learn when you listen to kids. And so when he comes up with the tray, he said, no, honey, I don't mean that one. I mean the fuchsia tray, this one over here. Can you get that for me? So he goes back, gets the fuchsia tray. That's the entire intervention. And that's it. 6 weeks later, every child in that classroom in an independent quiz was able to identify which tray had the fuchsia color. That's the level of understanding we're talking about here. I recognize that my literacy colleagues can say, well, there's a lot more about vocabulary we could develop right now, and I have to agree. But for the Action on Objects framework, all we have to be able to ensure is that if I ask a child to grab a hundreds flat for me, they will be able to pick up a hundreds flat and not the thousands cube. That's really what we're asking. Can you identify one of these objects enough so you can bring it up to me so I can ask you to do something with it? And that's where we're going to next when we think about what is it we're asking our students to do. Well, as teacher, remember in the authority section of CARE, in teacher, we get to select the activity. You notice I'm the one that posed the horse problem. I probably should have made sure that you know what was meant by the term horse, buy, sell, and so on, but I figured that was part of your commonplace. So you see I'm using both commonplace and authority here. The authority is to pick the activity and the manipulative. You notice over here, I get to choose what manipulatives. Are we going to use base 10 blocks? Are we going to use Cuisenaire rods? Are we going to use play money? Are we going to use, what is it we're acting upon? And I also gave you some clues in terms of how to organize your work. Remember how we pulled up the spreadsheet and we recorded the work as was being put forward, and I had you report a record of action to me. And on the basis of that record of action, some math naturally emerged. Basically, hopefully you were able to understand the tax accountant when the tax accountant came up with the correct answer. This is a complete teaching cycle from here over to here. So we generate vocabulary using the materials we're thinking with. We select the activity. We help the students organize their work. And we help them build a record of action, which, as I'll show in future discussions, looks like the procedure they would learn in the textbook. So this way they can go home and they can still get support from their mother, their father, their aunts, community friends, who may not be understanding the more hands-on way they've learned it. The record of action really should like the old school procedure. Now, some of you will notice that we have this self-posed problems over here. And in an ideal world, we would love to have this in every lesson. In other words, give the kids enough time where they can come up with their own problems. This way they come to recognize that it's not just teacher who gets to pose a problem, but I'm just as good a mathematician. Like Pa Kettle, I'm a pretty good mathematician. I may not know how to solve the problem yet, but I can use a similar activity to what was modeled. I can organize my work, I can build my own record of action, and think about how that really reinforces what you're doing as a teacher. I recognize that in a single classroom lesson, you often don't have time to get to this stage, but it is really the ideal where we get to where we can understand for ourselves. Now, in our classes, we will be dealing with the objects of manipulatives and the object of sketching. If I were teaching a middle school class, I would add mental picturing to that. If I were teaching secondary and college, I would add abstraction. But for our bailiwick, we're going to be sticking with manipulatives, and this is generally early childhood through 3rd or 4th grade, and sketching, which is 4th grade through 6th grade, provided the sketch draws from the manipulative. And we'll discuss this in greater detail later. So what is a complete teaching cycle as we plan for instruction? We select the level of object we're going to think with. Are we going to think with hands-on? In other words, is this early childhood through 3rd or 4th grade? Are we going to teach with sketching? Is this 4th through 6th grade? And do the students have the vocabulary necessary to pick out the important pieces so they can understand it? If they do, we get to choose the actions, how to organize those actions, and what the record of action should look like. I believe at this point, you should be able to see how this CARE acronym creates the classroom environment. The Action on Objects framework creates the series of teaching steps. And whether I'm teaching pre-kindergarten or calculus, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to generate vocabulary. I'm going to give problems. I'm going to help organize those problems. And we're going to explore together the mathematics that emerges from it.